Thank you, Dr. Ashrawi, for this certainly insightful and rightfully opinionated lecture on a very interesting and topical subject tonight. Now, we will have some discussion. Wir werden also uns etwas in einer Diskussion engagieren. Wir bitten Sie, Fragen zu stellen. Sie können das auf Deutsch tun, dann werden wir das übersetzen. Or you may formulate your questions in English if you like to. Wie in Duisburg auch, werde ich mich dabei der Hilfe von...
Or in Arabic, I think some people are ready to ask in Arabic.
Then the others are not going to understand a word.
In that case, you have to translate the question. Ich werde mich dabei wieder der Hilfe von Dr. Jochen Hippler bedienen. Dr. Hippler ist Politikwissenschaftler und Mitarbeiter im Institut für Entwicklung und Frieden, INEF, das bei uns zum Fachbereich Gesellschaftswissenschaften an unserer Universität in Duisburg gehört. Und er ist dadurch ausgewiesen, dass der Schwerpunkt seiner Arbeiten schon seit vielen Jahren aktuelle Fragen der internationalen Politik, der gegenwärtigen politischen, sozialen und theologischen Umbruchsprozesse betrifft und dass dabei seine Spezialgebiete die Umbrüche im Nord-Süd-Konflikt, aber auch im Nahen und Mittleren Osten und insbesondere in islamisch geprägten Ländern sind, sodass wir uns eigentlich keines kompetenteren Personen bedienen könnten, um diesen Prozess zu vermitteln. Ja, wer will sich zuerst äußern?
Thank you very much. I think we are going to switch to English now because that will make communication easier. And if somebody wants to do it in German, we can do an informal translation up here if that's possible. Let me just briefly tell you that I'm teaching at the University of Duisburg-Essen, but I'm on loan for a year. I'm in University of Bielefeld now for a year at the Zentrum für Interdisziplinäre Studien. So why don't we just start? Are there any questions which we preferably have in English and if not in other languages? Yeah. Do we have a microphone for the questions here? Okay, maybe the next one or two speakers so that we can already direct the microphone. The next microphone would be up there. Anybody else? Okay.
I don't know a lot of words in Arabic. Ahlan wa sahlan, Mrs. Ashrawi.
Shukran.
So you talked about the need of demilitarization. Do you have any plan? How do you try to reach this aim? That's my question. Shukran.
Okay. Shukran. Shall I take it?
Let's say two or three maybe. Okay. Yeah? The next one was up there. And then it was you. Okay, yeah, just go ahead.
It's my turn?
Yeah, if it's your mic, it's your turn.
If you have the mic, it's your turn, yeah.
I got three questions, madam.
Okay.
What do you think about Marwan al-Barghouti?
About Marwan Barghouti?
That would be the
use
first.
the mic, please. If you have it, use
the first. The second would be, what do you think about Mustafa al-Barghouti? And the third one would be, the latter gave an interview just a few days ago, and in this interview he said...
Who was it who gave it?
Mustafa.
Barghouti. Ah.
In this interview he said, he was asked, what do you expect from the European Union? That was the question. And the answer was the European Union could declare that she would connect economic association agreements with one condition: the stop of the enlargement of settlements, just not the dismantling, but just the stop. Is that, does that mean we demand too much? Do you?
Okay, so one final one. It's up there at the wall. So many walls here, yeah. And it would be nice if you wouldn't add another three, just maybe one or two.
Die Al-Qassam-Raketen werden sehr oft von israelischen Medien und Politikern und nicht selten auch von europäischen Politikern als die größte Bedrohung für die Existenz von Israel dargestellt. Können Sie uns freundlicherweise...
Wait, I'm translating.
Yeah.
Yeah?
kann auch das in Arabische übersetzen gleich. Können Sie uns bitte sagen, wie viele israelische Zivilisten wurden durch Al-Qassam-Raketen im Jahr 2007 getötet und wie viele palästinensische Zivilisten wurden durch israelische Soldaten getötet? ممكن ممكن تقولي لنا كم مدني إسرائيلي قتل من خلال صواريخ قسام وكم مدني فلسطيني قتلوا بالسلاح الجنود الإسرائيليين عشان نقدر يعني نتخيل ما هو حجم الخطر اللي بيمثل صواريخ القسام على الوجود الإسرائيلي. بهذه الكذبة الكبرى يعني.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to answer the three questioners because they asked more than 3 questions. Demilitarization is something that we are all calling for. We haven't presented a plan, but when you talk about demilitarization, it means that there has to be consistency and parity in dealing with the region, with all the states in the region. You cannot select, you cannot say, I don't believe also weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons have a religion. You cannot say this is an Islamic weapon, and this is a Jewish weapon, and this is a... Many people are saying there's an Islamic nuclear bomb in Pakistan also. I don't know if they have faith, but anyway. You cannot isolate those. I think there should be, under UN organizations, particularly IAEA, a program of full inspection and full transparency for all the countries of the region. Egypt has been calling for that because part of the Egyptian-Israeli agreement, as a result of that agreement in Camp David, Egypt totally stopped any kind of nuclear testing, even for peaceful purposes. And the Arab countries all have no nuclear testing, even for, power and so on, even though the power grid is obsolete and costly in the Arab world. Now, if this continues like this, there are many Arab countries that are saying, well, since there are some countries that are more kosher than others, some countries can have nuclear weapons and others cannot, why don't we all have nuclear weapons? And you're going to start a whole nuclear race. And then they're talking about, well, Syria is going to Korea and North Korea and trying to get nuclear. How do you know? And you're talking about Iran as having... Once you start doing that, nuclear weapons are not a deterrent. They're going to become a nuclear race. And the fact is that Israel has been given preferential treatment to develop and maintain a nuclear weapon program without any kind of accountability or inspection or transparency, and everybody else is being made subject to sanctions and wars. So we believe that we should do it through the UN, through the IAEA, and through the concerted will of the international community. It is time, and I think it should be part of the Arab program. They shouldn't just talk about peace, they shouldn't talk about strategic options and abstractions. Let's have a program of total nuclear inspection. Now, Libya unilaterally decided that they want to become, close to the Americans, so they unilaterally decided to let go of all their weapons, and they invited the Americans to inspect everything, and they now no longer have any kind of experimentation, whether nuclear or otherwise, or chemical and so on. Now, this is not how to go about it, as a sort of total stripping unilaterally. It should be done for everybody. If you want to go into a nudist club, everybody should be nude. And that's important. Now, what do I think of? I'm not talking about individuals, but let's say Marwan Barghouti is a leader. I know him very well. He was my student. He was the head of the student council when I was dean and the university council at the university. So we used to negotiate together. But I think he's a person of leadership, of standing. He's respected by everybody. And I think he should be released because the Palestinian people need it. And I think all these charges do not hold water. They tried him in a criminal court in Tel Aviv, in Israel. He's a political prisoner and he's a political leader, and he should be dealt with as such. He should be released, and he should take his rightful position, because I think he can be a unifying force. People respect him, and he knows how to work with everybody, and I think he is badly needed. Mustafa is a colleague of mine. I know him very well. I think he's one of the hardest working individuals I know. He's absolutely energetic and at it. Now he's a member of the PLC, the Legislative Council, but that's, as I am, but that's not working. In his interview, what do you expect the EU? Now, we've been asking the EU also. There's Article 1 and 4 in terms of violations of human rights and so on, particularly when it comes to persistent Israeli violations of the Palestinians, to subject, to make this dependent on Israel's compliance. We talked about the trade agreements and the certificate of origin, that Israel is selling products from the settlements to Europe, and you should ask for that. But to me, I think the best approach is the BDS approach: boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Why is it that we, under occupation, have been subject to boycott and to sanctions, just for electing the wrong people, so to speak? And yet Israel, for decades, has been violating our rights and international law and has not been subject to any type of accountability, let alone any boycott or divestment or sanctions, except once. Once, when Israel closed down all the universities, the European Union, I think it wasn't a union then, threatened to stop academic or research exchange or cooperation. And they reopened the universities. But you see, Israel is used not to not being held accountable, to not paying the price of any violation, and to getting away with everything. I think Europe should really implement its own rules, its own regulations when it comes to relations with other countries. There is no country above the law, and there are no people who are outside the law. Everybody should be treated the same. And the EU must implement its own policies. We're not asking them to do anything that is outside their own laws and outside their own policies. So I think, well, the public, if the governments don't do it, the public should do it. And there are many movements. It's like in the States, there are many churches that decided, starting with, I think it was the Methodist, and then the Episcopal Church, decided to boycott, decided on divestment, that they're not going to invest in anything that has any relations with Israel and that is used to oppress the Palestinian people, including companies like Caterpillar and so on. So this is another way. But also the EU must take a political stance. We cannot just talk about economic issues. It has a different political program from the Americans. It should not constantly be taken for granted and treated as an appendage to American policies. Europe is the neighbor of the Middle East. We are not just the backyard of the US. Europe has its own policies and has to implement them. Since 1971, I think since the Venice Declaration and move all the way up to Madrid and so on, Europe has had a distinctive political voice. The only problem is that it did not implement it. It accepted to be excluded, isolated. It did not want to have any kind of run-in with the Americans. They didn't want to work at cross purposes with the Americans. So the US decided to define the parameters of the game and the role of Europe. And it's been our role for years to tell the Europeans, you have more power than you think you do, and you should have a political role, not just an economic role. And I think that's where we should work as well. The nuclear weapons of Israel, I don't know, you said they're a threat. I think they're a threat, yeah. The Qassam rockets, of course, 2 Israelis were killed by the Qassam rockets in the last, or since the beginning, the last year, I think. The last year, 2 Israelis. But over 1,000 Palestinians were killed by bombing and shelling and so on. So if we use the same policy that the end justifies the means, that if you kill one Palestinian, then we can kill thousands of Israelis, then we would end up in a spiral, in a bloodbath. But actually, the Qassam rockets, I think, have been used as a way of exaggerating the threat, the insecurity of Israel, and justifying the violence used by very sophisticated weapons. Remember when they bombed, they used a 2-ton bomb against a residential building. And they killed how many? 14, 19 civilians in that building. And they asked the pilot, what did you feel when you threw these bombs at a residential building to kill one person? They wanted to get Salah Shahadi, I think, who was in Hamas Qassam brigades. And he said, all I felt was a quiver of the wing of the airplane when I released the bombs. That's all I felt. So it's this kind of attitude, that dispassionate killing from a distance, and then the exaggeration of a sense of victimization that has created this enormous capacity for violence and for disregarding the impact of the violence. And this led to devaluation of Palestinian lives and Palestinian rights. We are totally devalued. And people become desensitized. Every day Palestinians are being killed. Do you hear it? Do you read about it? Do you see it on TV? No, because it's normal. Palestinians are made to die every day. And that's it, whether they're in their homes or in the street or in their cars, or whether they are militants, they have to die. And nobody, and the real cruelty is that they're dying in silence, needlessly, and nobody is holding their killers responsible. But if an Israeli is hurt or injured, then we're back to the labels and stereotypes. All Palestinians are terrorists, Israel has security threats, Israel has to be protected, and it's the Palestinians who are the aggressors. That is something that is really not very normal in this equation. I think these are all the questions.
I think we have room for a few more. You and somebody over there. And the third one is, okay, it's you. Will you start?
Professor Ashrawi, welcome back to Germany. Please come again to Germany. We need you here. Jetzt stelle ich meine Frage auf Deutsch. Meine Frage bezieht sich auf den ehemaligen oder Ex-Premierminister Tony Blair. Der befindet sich ja im Nahen Osten. Und ich glaube, er spielt die Beobachterrolle. Trotzdem würde ich ja gerne die Frage stellen an Frau Professor Ashrawi, ob er direkten Kontakt zu ihr hat und ob er gewisse Konsultationen bei ihr holt.
Speak up a little. Können Sie ein bisschen lauter sprechen? Weil
okay.
Tony Blair, ja.
Also ob Tony Blair sich bei Frau Professor Ashrawi Beratung holt.
Pardon?
So the next one.
I didn't hear the joke. So you said something that made people laugh.
You did not hear. Do we have a second mic?
Okay. We knew that the situation in Palestine is very complicated, and you told us today it's even more complicated than we thought before. My question is, what is your personal view, or let's better say vision, how to solve the problem in Palestine? You have many millions of Jewish people there, many millions of Palestine people. What is your personal view or vision to get a geographical solution or political solution?
That's the $100,000 question. What is the solution to the question?
It's your personal view on it.
Yeah.
Okay. You clearly identified the United States as a main, if not the main, supporter, instigator of injustice and destabilization and war in the United States. You have that very well. You have articulated that very well. And do you see any of the candidates for president in the United States having a sensible approach?
Okay.
Right. Very interesting questions. What is Tony Blair's role now? Huh? Remember last time, I don't know if you were in my previous lecture, but I said something that wasn't very diplomatic, and because I'm not a diplomat, I can say it. I said, when politicians retire or people retire, they're given a gold watch. It seems to me the Palestinian issue was given to Tony Blair as the gold watch of his retirement. He was given this post. I think now he's moving more towards the European role. But he was given this post by his good friend, George W. Bush. Who was it to ask the question? You did. Because, yeah, in order to help the Palestinians build their institutions with an economic bias only. So he came to Palestine, he looked at several projects that were already in the making. There was one industrial zone project, there was one project trilateral between Japan, Jordan, and Palestine in Jericho, there was another in Tulkarem, and he said, now we're going to get money to implement these projects. Yes, he has come to see us, I've met with him several times. The question is, how do you propose to make any economic project work if Israel closes all access, all freedom of movement? We cannot get the workers there, if you cannot get the goods there, and if you cannot market anything. So he said, we can export directly to Jordan. Well, what's the point? So whatever economic endeavor you have, unless you get Israel to lift the siege, to give us back our freedom of movement, nothing can be done. And that's what we're telling all the donor countries and all the people in the Paris conference. The occupation has to stop strangling the Palestinians. We have to have this freedom of movement, and they cannot continue to destroy our economy anyway. You cannot use a Band-Aid treatment if you have a bleeding wound that's life-threatening. It's like you do not give an aspirin to cancer. We really need to have a serious rectification. The Palestinians can build institutions. It's not that we need Tony Blair to tell us how to build our, we've built them. But Israel has been destroying them systematically. They've destroyed the infrastructure, the institutions, everything. So to get Tony Blair to come and show us is fine. I mean, any Arab here, I'm sure there are many Arabs, knows the role of the Palestinians in building Arab institutions and Arab countries and Arab systems of government. We used to export know-how to the rest of the world. We don't need to import Tony Blair to tell us how to build institutions. But I mean no insult to Tony Blair, but I told him to his face, I said, if you can influence, if you can expand your mandate to have a political say, to play a political role, nothing that you do in the economic arena will be useful, will be effective. Then you'll be told, you go and play in that corner, and we big boys will play the political game. It doesn't work. These things have to be integrated and have to match. Now, I think he still is optimistic. He made a statement, I think, last week that peace is possible in 2008. I would like to record this and see how he will achieve it. Now, I'm sorry that I gave you a very complicated view, but reality is extremely complex, and is getting even more so. Who was it who asked me? You did, yes. What is my personal vision to solve this problem? I certainly do not look at it as a demographic problem, and I do not look at it as a religious problem. I told you, it is not God who is in conflict here. It's not a conflict of gods or titans or whatever. It's a human-made thing. It's a man-made thing. Last time I said, if it's a man-made conflict, then maybe women should solve it. But, and certainly the men have brought us to this situation. Whether it is the patriarchal system in Palestine or the militaristic, male chauvinistic system in Israel. But anyway, both exclude women and women's rights. The solution has to be legal, has to be political. It has to be based on international law. And it has to be based on sharing the land. Because if we don't do that, and if we rely on demography, because many people are saying, well, why don't you wait until the Palestinians outnumber the Israelis? Ask for the binational state, and then it'll be a clear apartheid system, and then you can say one person, one vote, and you will take over. Well, first of all, how many generations do you want to condemn to live under Israeli occupation? How much de-development and regression can we afford? Because Israel is dismantling everything. It's not a neutral bystander that's watching us as we just produce more babies. This is certainly, and I told you last time, I think this is a sexist, racist argument. We shouldn't just base our position on how many children, or as they said, the Palestinian woman's womb is the ticking time bomb. That is not acceptable, because there is an issue of justice and of right, of international law, and this is how we should frame it. So I told you I'm part of a dying breed, a disappearing breed, the people who still think that we should work for a two-state solution. Most people now are thinking it's already too late, that Israel has created enough facts to prevent the emergence of a viable Palestinian state, and therefore there are people who are saying the only solution is the one-state solution, the binational state. I believe we should have our own state, we should get rid of the occupation so we can catch our breath, rebuild ourselves. We're the only people who are regressing. Israel is really fragmenting and destroying the very fabric of Palestinian life. We want to rebuild ourselves. We want to have exercise self-determination, have our state, and then we will re-engage with Israel as neighbors. I don't see why not. If we want to have relations with Israel, they shouldn't be our occupiers. We shouldn't be one on top of the other. We should be neighbors next to each other, and we should be equals. And only when the Palestinians are given their day in the sun, and we can breathe freely, and we can harness our resources and our energies to positive ends, will we re-engage the whole region? Because I think the day of the nation state is rapidly coming to an end. Most people are living within larger conglomerates, right? You're all living with the European Union, for heaven's sake. And we, as Palestinians, still do not have our state. So let us have our state, and then let's discuss other permutations. Let's discuss regional re-engagement. I think that's when you can come up with some very interesting and creative views of how the region can work together. Not just between Palestine and Israel, but Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. Why not? Then we can work within a regional perspective, and we can liberate ourselves from the confines of narrow national boundaries. My view is if the occupation continues, it is doing irreparable damage, not just to the Palestinians, to the region, and will have repercussions, a ripple effect globally. Yes, the US, I can give you another lecture on the US, because I've been asked for years I've been negotiating with the Americans, and my experience, the Americans are more difficult to negotiate with than the Israelis, because they seem to think that they have the sacred duty of defending Israel, of protecting Israel, issues that the Israelis would accept, the Americans would reject in negotiations, because they project that the Israelis would never accept this. Anyway, but now, I think the last 7 years have been disastrous. They've been the worst in terms of the region. So anything that's not this administration will be positive, but will be an improvement, not positive. However, look, the Republicans don't stand a chance unless, the Democrats make a mess of it, which they might do, but so far they haven't. But the Americans have had enough of the Republicans for 7, 8 years, so they might move towards the Democrats. The Democrats, look, Hillary Clinton knew the Palestinian question. She talked about the Palestinian state and so on, but when she ran for Senate, she immediately changed 180 degrees and talked about the Palestinian terrorists and Israel's need for security. And she adopted even the language of the settlers in describing us. So Israel is a domestic issue in the US. Do not think that any candidate will speak about justice, peace, freedom, dignity, the integrity of the political system or the human being when they're running for office. They want campaign votes, they want campaign funds, they want exposure, they want the media, and they have a powerful lobby there. And there's nothing in it for them if they talk about the Palestinians. Pro-Israeli, it could be Jewish, it could be Christian. There are Jewish organizations that are very pro-Palestinian, and we have lots of contacts with them, and that are very offended that the extreme Jewish organizations seem to think they have a monopoly on the Jewish voice. They don't. And there are many Christian organizations that are worse than the Jews, the evangelicals. So it's not a question of religion, it's a question of ideology. The more extreme you are, the more destructive you can be. So the pro-Israeli lobby is not limited to one religion. And that's a powerful lobby. And no candidate is willing to confront it, or to anger it, or to lose the funds and the votes. And besides, they have the very convenient label. Anybody who criticizes Israel is immediately accused of being anti-Semitic. But people should make the distinction. Israel is a country, is a state. You criticize its policies, you criticize its actions, you criticize its injustices. Otherwise, you'll be guilty of reverse racism by saying, no, Israel is different. I'll treat it differently. No, it's like every country in the world. It has to abide by international law. That's it. And anyway, I don't see a real drastic shift. I think there is a gradual shift in public opinion. It's gradual. It's not sudden. It's not massive. But in public opinion, the Americans tend to be motivated by a sense of justice and fair play. Once they know what's happening, they think that they have to act. The American public is really, and I give lots of talks, I go to universities, I give many lectures, they want to know. And once they know, they feel they have a responsibility to do good. And they feel quite outraged that they were misled, that the mainstream media do not give them the facts. How come we didn't know, they say. And it's just a question of self-interest, manipulation and self-interest. So maybe gradually, if the public will hold their representatives accountable, if organizations like the Churches for Peace, the American Council of Churches, like the ethnic minorities, the Black Alliance, even the Hispanics and so on, if they do speak out on the Palestinian cause, if they do hold their representatives accountable, you will see a change in policy. But there's always a gap, a time rift between public opinion and the translation of that into policy. It takes time. There is a gradual shift. It's taking a lot of time. The mainstream media are still, following the same line, but now we have the internet. Now we have access to other sources of information. We can get direct information, You look at YouTube and you will see what's happening. So in many ways, there is no longer a monopoly on people's minds or on what people know. And it's this kind of access that probably will serve the underdogs. The weak party like us will serve us better. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, you are right. Time is progressing, and I think we are nearing an end. Let me just give you my impression that Hanan Ashrawi has given us, a very insightful presentation, and she has made points which we don't get in our media also, like the point that time is important in the problem of Palestine, that it's not just a solution or not a solution, it's about timing, that, for instance, at the beginning of the famous Oslo process, since then, the number of settlers had more than doubled. And these are not settlements like, camping sites. When you take a car from Ramallah to Nablus, you feel like you are overpowered by, crusaders' castles on the mountain. So it's not about nice small settlements. And if you increase the number by 2.5 during the peace process, you are reducing the opportunity for a statehood. It was even discussed in the 90s whether a Palestinian state could be economically feasible, and now it may be economically feasible, but it's not feasible in regard to just geography any longer. So this point, emphasizing the timing, I think is very often overlooked in the German discourse here. And the second point that was very key for our understanding, I think, really is putting it in the regional context. It's not just about Palestinians and Israelis doing something together, struggling about the same piece of land, which is a very important center of the problem, but it is linked to Egypt, to Lebanon, to Iraq, to American and other countries, meddling in the region. It's connected to all these things, and when we are thinking about this very reasonable question, how can the problem be solved? It's not enough thinking about just Israel and Palestine making a deal which from the outside could be, even if they would be willing, could be subverted. That's a very, very key point, which I really think was very important for us here to make. So, and that's the reason that I really think Hanan Ashrawi is one of the people from the area which I respect very much, and that's not politeness. I can be polite, but I also can speak from my heart. And what I really think is important, having people from the area who have emotions about what's going on, who have compassion, who have feeling of repression, feeling experience of disempowerment, of all the violence there, and who still are able to analyze clearly, who are able to use their academic professionalism and don't just go overboard because of all this compassion and all these emotions, who still can, analyze despite being involved in a very, very, equal and very academic way. And that is something we should teach our students in all universities of the world. The message seems to be no double standards. No double standards in regard to state policies, no double standards in regard to international law. That's one of the key messages of Professor Ashrawi. And if we are talking about international law and about human rights, we have the duty to apply them to everybody and not just to people who we don't like. And that is something which is worth listening to in Germany, in Palestine, in Israel, in America, and in the rest of the world. So I was very happy that the university this year, actually last year, decided to bring a person like Professor Hanan Ashrawi with this background, this knowledge, and this decency and humanity to our campus and to give the opportunity to speak. So I'm very grateful as a person.
Thank you very much.